When we want to understand if someone is a good fit for a team, we usually try to qualify whether they would be a good fit. We think about, who they are, will they fit culturally, do they have the right skills, all of those things. But did you know that you can also quantify people to see if they have what they need in order to be successful in the role that you want to put them in? More importantly, did you know that you can quantify yourself and learn a little bit about yourself in ways that maybe you hadn't considered before? We're going to talk about that today. Welcome into the channel. My name is Tom, and I'm the founder of Vertical Motion, where we help good people become great leaders. If you're interested in learning how we do that, there's a link down below where you can click that and learn a little bit more about all the programs and services that we offer. And we are growing. It's pretty cool to see all of the growth here at Vertical Motion. There's now 12 employees. When I started this channel 2 years ago, there was 2, myself and my wife. She's still an employee, unfortunately for her, but we do have 12 people here now, over 160 clients in the Executive Career Accelerator. We now have 6 clients in a Paycheck to Purpose program, which helps people actually leave the corporate world behind and become entrepreneurs. So if you learn about all that, you can click that link. But today what we're talking about is how to use psychometrics and data to better understand others and better understand yourself as well. So like I was saying, when we think about hiring someone or bringing someone onto a team as managers and executives, it's pretty common for us to qualify this person. And I remember back in 2010 through 2013 when I ran my first startup that I had 3 questions that I would ask potential candidates for roles. And the questions were, can you do the job? Will you like the job? And will we like you? Right? And so those are 3 qualifications of the person. And they're individually good questions to ask. And they give you kind of a holistic idea, a feeling of whether this is a good fit or not. But it's not a ton of data. It's just a feeling, right? What I have learned recently over the last 2 years doing all of this executive career coaching is that there are ways to quantify people, including yourself, so that you can understand how they might actually be a good fit or a bad fit for a role, whether they would love the role, whether they can do the role, whether we would love them. All of those things can actually be quantified. And that has gotten me really interested. So as an engineer, I'm definitely curious about the analytic data side of something that has always been a gut feeling or an instinct for me as a leader. So first of all, what are these tools that I'm talking about? Well, there's a lot of them out there. There are tools such as Myers-Briggs, DISC, the Big 5, StrengthsFinder, Enneagram, Culture Index, Predictive Index, and then there's some really cool self-assessments like a self-SWOT analysis and 360-degree feedback. All of those are really great tools to help dive into and understand someone at a deeper level. And each of these tools, they're not all perfect. In fact, none of them are perfect. But together, if you use several of them at the same time, you can actually see multiple dimensions of a person. And this is where it gets real interesting from my perspective. So what I want to talk to you today about these tools is how to use them, why to use them, and why they're not always perfect. Okay? So how do you use these assessments? Well, generally speaking, these assessments are assessments where you ask someone to just fill out a survey and they go through a web-based prompt usually that's asking questions, right? So if you take 16personalities.com, which is a mixture of Myers-Briggs and High Five together, creating some pretty cool information from those 2 kind of open source ways of doing things. So 16 Personalities creates their own assessment based on a couple different things. Well, you can go to 16personalities.com and you can take an assessment and it will give you your MBTI type indicator, Myers-Briggs type indicator, right? So it can be one of 4 dichotomies that you figure out about yourself. Are you introverted or extroverted? Are you someone who makes decisions logically or emotionally? Are you someone who is very detail-oriented or better with concepts? Do you like schedules and rigidity or do you like to be spontaneous, right? So those 4 dichotomies are what 16 personalities is measuring. And in that, you can learn a lot about yourself or whoever is taking the assessment. So for example, I am an ENFJ. That means I'm extroverted, intuitive, which means I'm good with concepts, better with concepts than details, which is a very true statement. I make my decisions emotionally, also very true. And J, judging, means that I actually like to have schedule and rigidity and plans. And so ENFJ tells me a lot about myself. Well, there are 15 other personality types. And when you think about the interactions between those 16 different personality types, it tells you a lot about not just the individual, but the relationship dynamic between two different people. So for example, my wife is an ISFJ. She's introverted. She's very specific and detail oriented. She also makes decisions emotionally, and she likes to have schedules. So as an ISFJ, my wife is going to be more of like a caregiver personality. As an ENFJ, I'm going to be a champion of causes. I'm someone who is compelled to run into a burning building or get out of the car and go help someone that's just been in a car accident. It's just my nature to rush in and help. I feel the need. I'm compelled to be a champion for those who can't help themselves. My wife is an ISFJ. We share two letters, FJ, together, right? But the IS means that she's more of a caregiver, someone who wants to work behind the scenes to make sure that someone has what they need. And so we both care to help, but we help in different ways, right? My son is an INTP. And what that means is he's introverted, intuitive, so he's good with big picture stuff. T means he makes decisions through logic. And P means that he actually likes to have spontaneity or not really be held to a schedule and just kind of be more creative, right? So INTPs are people who actually like to think about the cosmos, and they have like this, it's called the life of the inner mind for INTPs. So these are just 3 examples of the 16 personalities from the 16 personalities assessment or Myers-Briggs assessment. And you can learn a lot about an individual, you can learn a lot about yourself, and you can learn about the dynamics of those relationships all from that tool. But no tool's perfect, not even close. In fact, the Myers-Briggs assessment is kind of a generalization, and it doesn't work when someone is kind of in between two things where they are equally introverted, extroverted. It kind of breaks down because you're literally putting people into buckets. And so people who are extremely one of the 4 traits, well, they're easy to characterize and quantify. Someone who's more in the middle, they're not so easily quantified by a tool like 16 personalities. And this is why in our program, the Executive Career Accelerator, and also in our Paycheck to Purpose program, we take people through these psychometric assessments. We take them through 4, soon to be 5, actually, psychometrics. And 16 personalities is one of them. It helps us understand a little bit about why the person does what they do, and also understand what their needs are as a person, right? So when you run multiple assessments on a person, you actually start to see a couple different views, right? So Myers-Briggs, for example, is a measure of your personality. It's how we perceive the world. Well, DISC is different. DISC, for example, is a measure of your behaviors. It's how we interact with the world. And so if you assess someone's personality and then you assess their behaviors, you can learn some things about people. And sometimes they line up and sometimes they don't. And here's the reason they don't line up is because people behave differently than their natural personality sometimes. They have learned behaviors that help them be successful in life. But those learned behaviors may not match who they actually truly are. And that mismatch can cause a lot of stress and anxiety in the life of that person. So knowing that about people really tells you a lot, not only just what the 2 psychometric assessments say, but also what the combination of the 2 tell you, right? Then there's other ones that are proprietary, like Culture Index, which is one of the ones that we use, which is really cool. It maps you in relation to other people in an organization, people who are strategic, who are detail-oriented, who are technical, who are social, right? So it's a way of kind of showing people like, hey, I need to hire someone who is very operational oriented, very detail oriented, and will get things done, right? Well, there's a personality type in Culture Index called the architect that is perfectly suited for that. They're somewhat strategic and they are very technical and they tend to be great operators. Well, you don't want to put an architect in a role that would be for someone who is very detail oriented and very social and really about just kind of cleaning up the messes around people and making things kind of even, or just, filing information. Or you wouldn't want to put that architect into a role that would be better suited for a craftsman who would be very detail-oriented, meticulous, and likes to do the same thing 1,000 times a day. So when you assess people, you get to understand their trends, their tendencies, and when you do multiple assessments on someone, you start to get a much higher fidelity image of who that person actually is. Then when you mix in some self-assessment tools, such as a 360-degree feedback review or a self-SWOT analysis of the individual, that gives you even more context test, and that is coming from the individual themselves as opposed to the psychometric analysis and the tests. So when you put all this together, you start to get a very, very clear picture of who someone is. And we have used this in our program primarily to help people understand themselves so that they can understand their own motivations, their own needs, and the way that they want to move forward in their lives, careers, and businesses. But this gets really powerful when you do it on teams and when you measure everyone in a team and you understand all of the psychometric and self-assessment information about the entire team. You can now look at individual team dynamics. You can actually see if people are in the right seat on the bus, if they should be moved to a different role, or how they should move forward in their career, or maybe they shouldn't even be there at all, or they're completely underutilized. Right? We learn a lot about people from these assessments that we might sense that they're, someone with a lot of value. We might sense that they have a lot of growth potential, but this actually helps really reveal that for the people who do. Now, one important caveat here is that all of these assessments, they're not foolproof, they're not perfect. And they can actually mislead you if you do them wrong. One of the biggest challenges that we have is we've done this now almost 200 times, and sometimes we'll get someone who's very depressed or just in a bad mood or just rushed through it. And then we'll get some results that don't make sense. We'll have a conversation with them and they're like, yeah, that doesn't sound like me. Well, when did you take the assessment? Oh, it was on Saturday evening. I'm like, what was going on? Oh, I was just in a fight with my neighbor and then I came home and rushed through it. Like, well, there you go. That's why you show up differently than who you naturally are. And so when and how you take these assessments and in what state of mind you are in really matters, right? The tools can't see through, clouded thinking like from depression, anxiety, and other things, right? And neurodivergent people all kind of show up the same way on some of these assessments, which is a little frustrating that we don't have better tools to kind of map out neurodivergent people. But you just have to know that you use these tools not as rigid, okay, this is who you are and this is who you'll always be. No, I don't believe that. I know that a lot of people do believe in that rigidity, but I don't. I believe that the tools are only as good as the person making them and the person taking them. So everything is with a grain of salt. And at the end of the day, that's why the qualification of things matters equally with the quantification. So if you have data about yourself, your personality from these assessments, and you're able to take time to actually self-analyze and think about yourself or get feedback from several people in your life and your career, now you have a really nice holistic quant and qualitative understanding of yourself or of your team or of a dynamic between multiple individuals. And so I love these tools. I think they're very powerful. So I would highly encourage you to try some of these psychometric assessments for yourself. Many of them are free, not all of them, and they all have paid upsells for more detailed reports. Some of it's useful, some of it's not. It's kind of for you to figure out on your own, unfortunately. But we do pay for a lot of these assessments and they're very much worth it, right? So 16personalities.com does have a free assessment that's based on Myers-Briggs. That's probably where I would send you first and kind of figure out what your MBTI type is. What is your type? So I'm ENFJ. What are you? Actually, I'd love for you to, in the comments below, tell me what your Myers-Briggs personality type is. So go to 16personalities.com, take the assessment, and then just put a comment down below. Your ISFP, ENTJ, whatever you are. I'd love to know, what people are, and that will help us kind of understand who our audience is a little bit. So it'd be really powerful. So think about doing that and think about how you can use some of this psychometric data, these assessment tools to better understand yourself, your team, and the dynamic between all of you. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. If you want to learn more about the psychometric analysis that we do for our clients, you can click that link down below to learn more about our programs and talk with a coach to figure out what might be useful for you. That's what I got for you today. I hope this was a good video for you, and I'll see you in the next one.